Welcome, everyone. My name is Julie Shields-Rutina, and I am the Director of College Planning here at MEFA. And this webinar this morning is part of our webinar series for school counselors. And we're going to discuss having the college cost conversation. So it's a short webinar. I have a few slides. We'll talk about this a little bit. And then please know that you can ask questions. Hopefully you can see on the right side of your screen the chat feature, the question feature. You can ask questions, and I will make sure to talk about all of the thoughts and questions and issues that come up for you. So thank you for being here. So, here's a picture of me. So it can feel a little more personal. I have been doing this work for over 30 years. And so I'm happy, I love talking about all of this and happy to share with all of you. I will add that I also have two children, and one is a senior in college and one is a senior in high school. So this is overtaking my life on both a professional and a personal level, but happy to share even the additional pieces that I'm learning right now going through the process. I think most of you know MEFA, but I'll just talk about MEFA a little bit, mainly along the lines of how we can be of assistance to you in your jobs. So we have been around since 1982, and we have the mission of helping families plan, save, and pay for college. So there are so many ways that you can get in touch with us and that families can get in touch with us. And we encourage you to do that. So we're so happy to be your backup resource support, especially when it comes to these financial conversations. One of the greatest tools that I like, the greatest resources for families and for you, is that we have an email listserv or an email curriculum that if you go to our website, MIFA.org, and scroll down, as a parent, it will say sign up for information and tips via email. I would encourage all of your families to do that. Twice a month, we send an email with all kinds of detailed information depending on the age of the student. So if the student is a junior in high school, it is chock full of information about the admissions process and the financial aid process. And then it goes on from there, even when the student is in college. We also have a similar list for school counselors. So if you're on our website and you go to the counselor tab, you can sign up for emails for school counselors, and hopefully those will be helpful to you too. You can also call us. You can follow us on social media. You can send an email to us, and you know that we have in-person seminars as well as these webinars for, again, both school counselors and families. So if you're signed up for that email list, you hear about all of this information. So the agenda this morning, we're going to talk about college expenses, and then we're going to talk about having college cost conversations with students and families. And then we'll share some resources as well. So this chart is from the College Board's Trends in College Pricing, which comes out every year, this report, with lots of good data. And what this shows is the average published tuition and fees in 2018 by sector, by type of institution, ranging from private, nonprofit 4-year college, public 4-year, and public 2-year. And you'll see that these costs just keep going up every year, as we know. But the point I like to make here is that the published tuition and fee costs, which of course panics everyone because it just keeps going up and it's expensive, and families of whatever age their student is, they're thinking, how much is it going to be when my student gets there, and how am I going to do this? And they're coming to you panicked, and that probably adds a whole level of panic to the admissions process that you're trying to help them with as well. So this is something different. It also adds in net prices. And really, that's how we talk to families, where we say the published price, whether it's the tuition and fee cost or the full cost of attendance, which we'll talk about, is really not of the greatest concern to a family and to a student. What's really more important is for them to know the net price. And what net price means is the published cost, the full cost, minus any financial aid, of all types of financial aid, any money that's going to come off that price. That's what a family really needs to know. What am I going to pay? And it's a much more important figure, so it's just good to let families understand that. So then we really have to educate them on how they get a sense of what that is. And here are some more net prices, which you can see that the net price lines, the dotted lines, are much flatter than the published tuition and fee prices. And that's the key here. The prices keep going up at a fairly high rate, but the net prices, what families are actually paying, have a much straighter trajectory. So there is some financial aid that is keeping up with these prices, and that's a key message to say to families. So that talked about tuition and fee prices, but we know for many students there's a larger cost than just tuition and fees. So the full cost of attendance is tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses. And personal expenses can be wide. That's anything else that a student is spending money on while they're on campus. It could be things like shampoo, pizza that's outside of the room and board plan, things like that. So there's a little flexibility there, but that whole group of college expenses is something that families do need to understand, because a student can't show up on campus not planning for books and supply expenses and transportation expenses and personal expenses. So that's also something that families need to understand. And then here it is broken down a little bit more. So, there's the regular tuition and fee price, but that can be variable. So that varies whether a student is an in-state student. Is that an in-state tuition, or is it an out-of-state cost? There are the regular fees. Are there other fees? We talk with students about health insurance fees, and can you waive those if you're on your parents' health insurance plan? Yes. Are there other fees that are specific to a certain type of program that you are enrolled in? So just so that parents and students are aware that they do need to understand the real number for the tuition and fees. And then there's some variability with room and board as well. Colleges do sometimes have different offerings of residence halls. Sometimes as a freshman, most first-year students are put in to a specific housing opportunity, but as the student goes on in the college, there are choices for making that more affordable or a better situation for the student given their program. Do they want to live in major specific housing or things like that? So there's sometimes choices with that and different costs associated. And the same with board. In fact, I happen to have a son who likes to eat a lot, so he has always chosen the most expensive meal plan. But there are different choices, and someone who likes to do prepare more of their own food could maybe be in a situation where they're in an apartment, they're cooking more of their own food, they're buying more of their own food and reducing that. And there's no way around it. Books and supplies are expensive, although there seem to be more than ever ways for students to get around some of those costs. And we won't get into that today, and maybe we'll have another webinar on this and interview some students, but students have ways of buying used textbooks online and renting, and there are lots of options. So students should talk to each other about some of those ways to reduce that. Transportation can vary. Do you have to factor in a flight home at holiday time, or does a student need to have a car on campus because they're doing an internship? There are things like that that will increase or decrease that transportation cost. And then again, the personal expenses, students have to know their own habits and needs. And I will say, from working with a lot of colleges, it's good to just pay attention to those things. Some colleges have free laundry and some charge for laundry. Some colleges have other free activities, and maybe some have fewer, and students might have to spend money on that. So just good to, in your research, have your students in their research figure out all of those. So I will say, we hear from school counselors all the time that the cost piece is a difficult conversation, and students are coming to you and maybe afraid and not sure what their family can afford. And so we know this is true. And in fact, American Student Assistance just did a survey of school counselors last year to talk with them about their knowledge and their need for knowledge about finances. And the results were pretty clear that only 55% of counselors told this survey that they received any of this training in graduate school. And in fact, this was very much on-the-job training. So we know that this is sort of outside of what your initial training has been. So again, that's why we like to help with this. So here are some of our ways that we talk to families and students about the importance of making sure that their college list includes an important component of financial fit. You talk with students all the time about creating a balanced college list, right? You're trying to get students to apply to colleges that they very much align with the profile as far as GPA and possibly test scores, and that it fits as far as the size and their major and all of that. You're trying to have them apply to colleges that they're a really good fit on academic and social sides, to make sure that most of the colleges they apply to, they'll receive an acceptance. And then you have them apply to some that might be a little bit more of a dream or a reach, but where they still have a shot at being accepted. Add those in, and then you probably talk with them about safety schools. You want them in the spring to get back a number of acceptances so they have options. And we just encourage you to also include in that schools that would be a good financial fit. So I would never tell a student or even a parent to have a student not apply to a college because of the cost. This is the tricky thing. Until they have that financial aid award letter in hand, they really don't know with 100% surety what their net cost will be. And there are so many factors to the financial aid process, which we won't get into here, but there is financial aid that is given on the basis of financial need, and there is financial aid given on the basis of merit in many places. So they should learn as much as possible about the financial aid process and how aid is awarded at those different schools. But they won't know for sure until they have the aid package in hand. So I wouldn't discourage someone applying to a college they really want to go to, but they have to do that with the understanding that it's going to be put in the mix with all of the other acceptances, and all of the factors are going to be weighed at the end before they make that decision, because it's really important to have financial fit. And I'll share one quick story, but we do a program called After the College Acceptance in the spring, and we bring families in and we help them decipher their award letters. And I have been in more than one conversation between a parent and a student where the student got into one school that they really wanted to get into and they really liked, and it was too expensive. It was not affordable. The financial aid package was not enough, and it was not going to be an affordable option. And the other schools that they were accepted at, they didn't like, and the student didn't want to go. And the parent was caught in this really difficult situation of wanting to help the student and be the best and make this dream happen, and yet feeling very overwhelmed because knowing it was not going to be a good financial situation. So to avoid situations like that, we try to encourage students to make sure they like every college on their list, and they need to find some affordable options that they like and have those on their list. That might be one of the biggest challenges in putting together that list and crafting a list where there are affordable, great options on their list. So the earlier they can do that, and they can understand that, and they can understand that they are not going to want to go to a college that is not a good financial fit, because it's not going to be good for anyone if they're taking on too much debt, their parents are taking on too much debt, they're always feeling overwhelmed in that way. So again, I don't think you have to know the details of the financial aid process to talk about these things. You can really talk about it very generally, but get those important points across to your students. And you might have your own experiences to share. We all do, and there are, I do know also some students, my son's friends, who went off to colleges that maybe were not a good financial fit, and then actually ended up transferring to a community college the second year. And it's working out fine, but it might have been nice for them to have considered that upfront, to think of a way of making it affordable from the beginning. So anyway, that's I'll talk a little bit more about that too, because I think that community colleges can be a great option. And there's been so much work done here in Massachusetts lately with Commonwealth Commitment and Mass Transfer as far as aligning the credits from the community colleges to the four-year state colleges and other private, to make it a more affordable path for many, many students. So then how is a student going to decide whether a college is affordable? Let's take that student and parent that I mentioned earlier and how they were not happy with each other. How can that parent and student decide, can we do this? Can we take on this debt? Is this going to be good for us? And so there are a number of things to consider. The family has to consider the number of other siblings that may be going to college in the future, or that have, maybe the siblings ahead have gone to college and the parents already have some educational debt. So those are things to consider. And sometimes I've seen students have a short-sighted view and decide, I just need to make sure I can afford the fall. And we really need to talk with them about, this is 4 years. And that's if you do everything on time and graduate on time. You need to make sure that for the long term, this can be affordable for you and your family. And again, because there are affordable options, the student will be better off finding an affordable option from the beginning. If they are going to borrow a loan, which we know most students are borrowing some type of a loan these days, and especially the federal loans, which I think have enough protections that as long as they're done and borrowed in a thoughtful way, the student understands what they're taking on, understands what their repayment will be when they graduate. I think that that's fine. It's almost unavoidable with many of these colleges. But it's important to know what the post-graduation monthly loan payment will be. So for example, I talk a lot to students and I say, if you take the full federal loans that you'll be eligible for, that will add up to about $27,000 for a 4-year undergraduate degree. And your repayment under a regular repayment plan will be about $300 a month when you graduate. So I think it's good for students to understand, and that even may not sink in with them, but just to understand that then when they graduate, they are going to need to craft their life to accommodate paying that loan payment each month. So I think that's an important conversation to have. And of course, what's really huge in figuring this out is, do they have any idea of the type of field they might be going into or the career? We do know certain fields, engineering, STEM fields, at certain institutions especially, might have very good starting salaries. And so a student needs to factor that in as well, and that might be fine to have a $300 loan payment at the end. But if the student really has no idea what they might like to do, or is thinking of a career that may not start, then that needs to be factored into the conversation. And further, is the student going to go to graduate school after that? Graduate school has less financial aid available than undergraduate, and so they really need to figure that in as well, that into the total amount of debt that they're going to borrow. One other piece is that all loans outside of the federal loan programs will require a credit check. So the federal loans do not require that for a student. They borrow the federal loans in their own name, and that's fine. But any additional loans for a student or a parent will require a credit check. And so families do need to know their credit score to know if they need to know if they'll be able to borrow a private loan. So we'll get into this, but I think it's really important to compare the award letters, the offers from all the institutions where they're accepted to make a good financial decision here. And we'll talk about places and ways to do that. So another piece that you can share these questions, we encourage all students to understand all of these things about finances before they commit to a school. So what is that full cost of attendance? Hopefully that's listed right on the award letter. And sometimes it is. I've seen some beautiful college financial aid award letters, and I've seen some, and I know you have too, that are not as clear. So the student really should figure out that full cost of attendance and go back to what we discussed at the beginning, making sure they understand all the hidden costs. These pieces, hopefully, when you're having these cost conversations, you're encouraging them to apply for financial aid. They need to at least apply, and on time and with all of the forms that a college requires to make sure they will get any money that they're eligible for. And they should also understand there are some nuances to the financial aid process depending on the college. So we know that all colleges require the FAFSA. Some also require the CSS profile. Some handle divorced or separated parents differently than others. So this is a place where I think students should get organized, list all the colleges they're thinking of attending, and maybe with a spreadsheet, figure out what's the financial aid deadline date, what forms are required, what are the little pieces that I don't want to forget. And students can also look online to hear about how is financial aid awarded, are there merit-based scholarships? And I think that's also, you probably from your work, the more you work with students, you get a good sense of all of that. We also, when a student is committing to an institution, we encourage them to be sure that they understand what the cost will be from year to year. So the way it should work is if a student receives a financial aid package freshman year, they should be able to count on that package as long as two things are possible. For any need-based aid, that their financial situation stays about the same. And for any merit-based aid, there might be a requirement that they need to keep a certain GPA on college campus. So make sure that they understand all of that so they can count on what the cost will be from year to year, and hopefully much. And here are a couple of other questions just about scholarships. So students should also take the time to find out how different colleges treat outside scholarships. And then we'll talk about a couple of tools, and then I'll look at your questions. But MIFA's tool, MIFA has MIFA Pathway, which is a student portal that's free, and students can go in and create an account. And this allows them to compare financial aid awards side by side. So they can really see, okay, I've received these 5 financial aid awards. Here are the costs for the different colleges. Here's the financial aid that I'm receiving, and then be able to compare that information. I've seen some families just create a spreadsheet or just put them all out on the dining room table. However they choose to do it, I think it's really important to make sure they compare apples to apples. And another tool is collegenavigator.gov. This is great for upfront. They're both good for upfront too, just getting a sense of if a school will be a good financial fit or not, even though they won't know 100% until they get the award letter. And this gives all kinds of information about families with incomes in the range of $60,000 to $80,000 on average receive a financial aid grant or scholarship of $20,000 or something like that. So they can really look at some detailed information here, as well as all of the academic information. And here's another one that does a little comparison for you, College Scorecard, which gives a lot of information about costs, net price, the debt that students usually leave the program with, really important. So I think these will help students with an informed choice when they're putting together their list to make sure they have colleges that are a good financial fit on that list up front, and then it will help them later when they're making their actual decision. And another great tool is just every college has something on their website called a net price calculator. And if a student just goes into a college website, types net price calculator, then they can find the tool and put in information about their finances and about their academics and get an estimate of what a financial aid package might look like for them based on the information they input. So again, I would never tell a student or a family to not apply to an institution. Parents might need to hear that message too, because it seemed like they weren't going to get financial aid or enough financial aid. But if a student goes in and runs a net price calculator at a certain institution and it shows a package that really isn't affordable, and the parent sees that and says, I don't think we can do that, then at least the student knows, okay, I'm going to keep that college on my list. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that I get accepted and that somehow, you know, there ends up being some additional money there. But the student should then have a more realistic idea that they need to get some other schools on their list that are a good financial fit. So I will stop there because I've done a lot of talking here. And let's see if, I'm going to see if you have any questions or things you want to talk about, the difficulties that you have. Type them right into the question feature or the chat feature. And I'll stay on for a little bit to continue